All right, Sascha, where are we today?
Los Angeles.
Okay.
But not just any part of Los Angeles. It's a huge, sprawling city. We're within spitting distance of Beverly Hills, Brentwood, Santa Monica. This is a nice part of town.
All right. Bel Air.
Right near the mansion, the Fresh Prince of Bel Air, in fact.
Okay.
And when we start off, it's pretty easy going. Nice tarmac road, houses, residential. But we keep going down it. The road gets rougher. And then it's just a dirt track. And then it really narrows, just enough space for one car. And it waves down into this secret valley, a hidden valley.
And what's it hiding?
Secret Nazi headquarters.
Oh, those Nazis, they get everywhere, don't they?
They do, just like lice, man. Once they get in, you can't get them out. This is Where'd Everyone Go? With me, Sascha Auerbach.
And me, Tom Ward. A journey into the weird history of abandoned places. All right, so we've got some video montage here.
So what you see here is this valley with a lot of trees kind of concealed. And we've got this weird staircase, this long staircase that just goes down and down and down.
It's a lot of stairs.
Yeah. And we've got some structures at the bottom. We've got something maybe looks like a water tower. Everything's really, really heavily graffitied now. And then there's this series of concrete kind of blocked out areas. That was a walled garden. And then you have some things that look like houses or residential structures.
Okay. And where does this story start?
Well, our story starts with a professor at UCLA, Dr. John Vincent, the head of the Huntington Hartford Foundation. Ever heard of it?
No.
All right. The Huntington Hartford Institute was this new artist colony. The idea was for people to go away to a secluded place, and this place is obviously very secluded, and write, be creative, like creative people do. It was named after a guy called Huntington Hartford, who was a businessman, philanthropist, a stage and film producer, and an art collector. So in 1948, Dr. Vincent was scouting all sorts of places to set up this retreat, and he came across this amazing ranch at the bottom of this hidden canyon on the edge of LA, and it was for sale. So he visits the ranch to inquire about buying it. He remembers seeing the extensive plantings maintained by a caretaker, a guard who unlocked the entrance gate, and a chain-link fence topped by barbed wire surrounding the entire property. He meets the owners in a steel garage on the site, which is where they were living at the time, and he hears this incredible tale about their lives and how they came to own the ranch.
Okay. So what did they tell him?
Well, the story that Vincent heard doesn't go public until 1975, when a local historian, Betty Lou Young, was writing a book on the area. She heard about Dr. Vincent's encounter with the former owners and asked him to provide an affidavit. This is how the story got out.
And I'm guessing because it didn't come out for a long time, there's some pretty juicy stuff in there.
Oh, yeah. And we have it thanks to our contributor, Hadley, who now possesses a copy of this affidavit.
So when I first came here about 20 years ago, and I was so utterly fascinated by this place, and then I started to hear all the legends and rumors of this Nazi camp and Hitler's palace and all of these crazy stories about what went on at Murphy Ranch in the 1930s. And I wanted to really start digging into it and learning the story for myself.
Okay, so Hadley unearthed this story.
Story about Nazis. Who doesn't love a story about Nazis?
Why didn't I know about Nazis in LA?
Well, it's not something you want to advertise, but it was a big deal at the time. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about the couple that owned it when Dr. Vincent visited, Winona and Norman Stevens. Now, they're the owners when Dr. Vincent comes around inquiring in the late 1940s. They're a married couple, not from the area. They're from Chicago. He was a wealthy engineer. She had family money, perhaps from mining operations. And they moved to the Southern California area at some point in the late 20s or early 30s. We're not exactly sure. Apparently, and this is important, Winona had always been fascinated with the occult and with metaphysical ideas and, paranormal type stuff. Okay. Now, on its own, totally harmless. But now we got to bring in another character, Herr Schmidt.
All right. I'm sensing the Nazi element here.
Starting to get it. At some point in the early 1930s, she comes into contact with a man only identified as Herr Schmidt, who claims to possess abilities to see into the future, a soothsayer, if you will. Winona falls totally under his spell, and tells the story about how she had seen evidence of his magic when she was in a car with him, and he said, "This car won't hit us." And it didn't. I know, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but
Hang
apparently...
on, the car coming towards them won't hit us, or the car that they're in.
It's magic. It's magic, Tom. It doesn't have to make sense.
It's also how you say it. You know, if you say it with enough conviction, people will be like, "Oh, he's amazing."
True.
Did you see what he did in the car, honey? He said that the car coming towards us wouldn't hit us, and it didn't. Okay, well, yeah.
Well, if it had...
He can stay.
If it added, then this would be a much shorter story, I think, too.
Yeah.
Which is like, the car hit him, and that was the end of Herr Schmidt and Winona.
He was discredited. He lost his soothsaying license.
Yeah, and then Norman went on to marry like a 20-something starlet. And
Yeah.
so on and so forth. Me Too movement, insert that bit. Anyway, so back to Herr Schmidt and his version of the future. Herr Schmidt convinces the Stevens that America is going to be defeated by Germany and that California would collapse, and they needed to make plans to be on the right side of history.
Right.
Get it? The right side of history?
The far right side.
Exactly.
They couldn't get more right, really.
For our contributor, Hadley.
So Herr Schmidt, who the Stevens basically believed had supernatural powers, told them that America was sure to fall to Germany, California would collapse, and that the Stevens needed to build a self-sustaining utopia where they would bring in a selected other chosen few people to stay safe during the war. And that then once the war was over, California was destroyed, the Stevens and their selected few would come back out and repopulate the world. And one assumes also take it over.
It's a lovely plan, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, if it had gone that way, then they would have felt pretty smug in 1945.
We'd all have Norman as a last name.
Yeah.
A bit disappointing.
Yeah.
Or Schmidt, maybe.
Or we'd have children called Herr. Is Herr Mr. in German?
I believe it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Term of respect.
It's not a name.
It's not a name. No.
Okay.
So
he didn't even tell them his first name.
Apparently,
he was telling them the future, but he wouldn't even sort of give them his first name.
Maybe that was part of the mystique. So let's move on to why this place is called the Murphy Ranch, though it later will get the nickname the Nazi White House. So in 1933, which is the same year that Adolf Hitler comes to power in Germany, the Normans buy the ranch under a pseudonym, Jessie Murphy, widow. They want to keep it as off the books and with as little suspicion as possible. I mean, if you're going to set up a secret Nazi hideout, you won't be like, "Oh, what's this for? My secret Nazi hideout." It kind of gives away the game, right? Now, self-sufficiency and not relying on the outside world was a huge part of the project because, right, California is going to collapse. They need to be able to survive on their own. So they begin building the infrastructure for this in the canyon. And we can still see that infrastructure today, like that long staircase that we saw in the visuals. That's just the beginning of it, right? That's just access. What else do you need? You need power. So they build a double generator power station. They also add a 20,000-gallon fuel oil tank, terraces leveled and planted with trees, all supplied with copper pipes and a watering outlet for each tree, and endless concrete steps for access.
Yeah, there's a lot of steps and no ramp for disabled people because Nazis hate the
don't
disabled.
Like them. Exactly, exactly. So this is all designed around this idea of self-sufficiency, completely self-sufficient communities. You have extensive gardens and plantings for growing food and different types of trees. You have a large stables area. This is probably where the ranch name comes from. They spent a pile on this. Now, keep in mind, this is 1930s dollars, $4 million on the infrastructure alone. Wow. To get the sense of that value, you got to multiply at least by 10, because $1. It's a lot more back then than it is today.
Oh, more. I'm going to say 100.
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, they dumped
Let's
a huge
just not
pile
check,
into it.
and we can just say big numbers.
Big numbers. Giant numbers.
I'm going to say it's $1 billion.
Big numbers.
I say it's $100 billion they spent.
Who's going to build this thing? Well, they go to really renowned architects to draw up their plans for their mansion. This thing is going to get the nickname the Nazi White House. One of the firms was Werdeman and Beckett, which is one of the premier architectural firms in all of Los Angeles. They built things like the Pan Pacific Auditorium, which is a very famous LA building. Now, when our contributor, Hadley, reached out to one of the sons of Werdeman and Beckett about the Murphy Ranch, he wasn't too happy. He got very mad and said that he knew his dad had worked on it, but that his dad was an American.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's important.
That is important for what happens next.
He helped the Nazis, but
he was a good American.
He was an American.
He was a patriot.
Okay.
So they also hired the firm of Paul R. Williams, one of the most legendary architects in the whole state. He was the first black architect in California, and he designed the homes of countless movie stars and important civic buildings in LA. Now, these drawings and blueprints still exist in the UCLA archives, which is where our contributor, Hadley, hunted them down.
You see this giant interior mansion that's like a Clue board game, right? So you have a parlor, you have all the normal rich people things, but then you have weird things like an underground pool and a giant factory that's in the basement where you can work on things, and a tower where you can, I can assume, only look over out at people, and an indoor swimming pool. Just a lot of things a normal even mansion at the time would not have. And there's multiple libraries, multiple bedrooms. I mean, it really seems like a place for a head of state and their government.
Okay, lots of pools, because Nazis like swimming too.
Well, it's good for the Constitution.
Yeah,
got to keep that Aryan physique in tip-top condition.
That's right. Make sure that your saluting arm is nice and strong.
Yeah, it gets tired easily with all those salutes. It's true. But there's some weird stuff too. Remember, she's into the occult, and Herr Schmidt cultivated that. So one of the blueprints, and I couldn't make this up, there's the strange rendering for a giant zodiac fountain containing all 12 signs.
Okay.
Yeah, Nazis love the occult too.
They do, yeah. So Mr. Smith, that's the translation.
Herr Schmidt?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's
so, I mean, he'd probably be less exciting to them if he was called Mr. Smith.
True. You got to go with Schmidt in this thing.
Yeah,
Nobody wants a Nazi with like a name like Smith.
Yeah.
It's not convincing.
Could I just suggest that we put the Zodiac fountain over there? Who are you? Well, Mr. Smith. I'll deal with the occult in the future, really.
And by the way, that car is not going to hit you.
Like, yes, that car that's coming towards us there, that's not going to hit you there.
Check out the magic powers on that, dude.
That's 500 francs, please. What is it, German money?
Which was like $100 million at the time, right? So let's get on to Nazis in America in this period and how big or small a presence they are. And it turns out much bigger than we realized, unfortunately. So there were actually a lot of Nazi supporters in Los Angeles, particularly in the movie industry. Which is particularly ironic because the movie industry also had a lot of people of Jewish extraction. My grandfather was one of them. Now, Hadley thinks that part of the reason that LA always brought out a lot of free thinkers, a lot of eccentric folks, and it was known for interest in the occult and communes from very early in our American history, and that it's pretty natural that all these kinds of insidious fascist ideas started to form here. I actually once heard another historian tell a joke about how America was founded when Britain tipped on its side and all the craziest people fell down into America, but then America was tipped on its side and all the craziest people fell down into California. So we're seeing this dynamic at play. There's a rumor about the place that starts during the 1930s when all this is going on. The neighbors in the canyon, which included a very popular Boy Scout camp just up the road, good place to train scouts, they'd see mysterious people in silver shirts and Nazi regalia traipsing up and down, doing all sorts of maneuvers on the stairs.
Okay. So this rumor got round.
But what were they actually seeing? And you can see, it is LA. You can see people dismissing it as, oh, maybe they're filming a movie about Nazis or who knows, lots of stuff happens in LA and you don't sit there and try to explain what's going on. But it turns out that these silver shirts, as they were called, were a Nazi sympathizing group established by William Dudley Pelley the day after Hitler was elected chancellor.
Right. Straight to it.
They're trying to get in on the game early.
They even had their own uniform planned out within a day.
Yeah.
They had their look. Most people take a while to find their look.
They were ready to go. And you'd think that, if you're going to be secret Nazis, you would pick a less obvious color, like brown or black. But man, it's Hollywood, so they go straight in with the silver.
Yeah, I think the brown would have made them look more like Nazis.
Oh, that is
by
a
all
good
accounts.
point.
So
Yeah.
maybe they were trying to make it a bit, as you say, a bit more
Silver. It's more like disco Nazis.
a bit more
really.
appealing.
Yeah. Silver's a nice color.
Yeah.
So
And this is before the war.
And
so
this is before the
we
war.
don't know
This
what
is
they're going to
before the
do
war.
yet. They're still just, just lively characters.
Yeah,
with
just
plans
like
and uniforms.
Those funny Nazis. Peli believed that the Fuhrer's rise was the fulfillment of a prophecy revealed to him by the spirit world in 1929.
Okay.
So again, we have the occult. And membership soared. That's
From
mad.
experience, based on American politics, the estimates of what people believe is always a lot less than what we then find out in the election.
Yeah, because you can't declare I'm a secret Nazi. It kind of defeats the purpose of being a secret Nazi. Again, the irony here is that a lot of the people of Jewish extraction who were fleeing persecution in Europe were trying to get to the United States, and little did they know that there's already 15,000 bloody Nazis there,
right.
At least.
Right. That's very unfortunate.
Yeah. Well,
but they're wearing silver shirts.
And they're wearing, well, at least they're easy to recognize, I suppose.
Yeah. The sun catches them.
It still sounds a bit disco to me. Anyway, they wore a large L on their uniform in the upper left corner of their shirt, an emblem standing for liberation from materialism, loyalty to the United States, and the Silver Legion.
Okay.
Now, Peli's goal was eventually to take power and implement a plan he called Christian economics in the United States. This was a scheme in which all property was owned by the state and where white citizens received shares based on their loyalty that guaranteed an income.
Right, okay.
And the question is asked is, well, what about everybody else? Well, much more sinister, as you can imagine. They are Nazis. So African Americans would be re-enslaved, and Jews would be excluded from the nation altogether.
Okay, I'm seeing a pattern here.
I mean, they're writing up the Nazi playbook right there in California.
See, the stuff with the socialism and the living off the land, that all sounds very nice. But then the re-enslavement and the exclusion,
Not so nice.
It's hard to fathom that the same person would be into both.
Well, remember, this was one of the keys of Nazi appeal, and Hitler's appeal in particular, is he was a bit of a chameleon. You know, when he talked to workers, he said, I'm for the workers. When he talked to wealthy industrialists, he said, I'm for industry. And when he talked to everyone, it was always about national strength. You know, it never really was a very coherent ideology to begin with. So the fact that this kind of confuses a lot of different things actually makes sense, considering what the Nazis actually did and how they pitched themselves. But I mean, Peli was clearly a kind of pitchman and a storyteller, and it should come as no surprise that he spent time in Hollywood as a successful screenwriter in the early 1920s. So the dude was used to making a pitch and writing a story. Now, later down the line, a congressional committee would later characterize these silver shirts as probably the largest, best financed, and best publicized Nazi copycats in the United States.
Okay.
And Peli himself was quite the character. He reportedly traveled with 40 armed bodyguards, and members were advised to keep sawed-off shotguns and 2,000 rounds of ammunition in their homes to protect, quote, white Christian America.
Right. I mean, I from experience, when you start arming your followers, it's usually days are numbered kind of stuff. You know, when I've seen documentaries on Netflix about cults, where all the members start, amassing weapons and guns and holding up in a house and start preparing for the big day. I'm like, okay, this isn't going to end well.
Never a good sign, especially with things like prophecy are involved.
Especially when you got God on your side. Isn't that enough?
Oh, geez. Well, every army that's ever marched in the world has always said that God's on their side. It's a commonality.
It's a good day for God. War, isn't it? You can't lose.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If you lose, then God doesn't get blamed. They just say, oh, he has a plan.
Yeah. Well, and, if they're marching for white Christian America, you can guess which groups are going to be excluded from that plan: African Americans and Jewish people. The Smithsonian Magazine will name Murphy Ranch as a place Peli's followers began constructing to become the base of pro-Nazi operations in the U.S.
Okay.
And it sounds like it, doesn't it? I mean, the self-sufficiency, arming, preparations for the fall of America.
All those steps as well. You've got to be really into the cause, with just the energy of kind of chiseling into the hills, thinking, goddamn foreigners. That's going to energize you. You've got to really, all the way up.
Yeah. So here's one of the worst parts, is that this was the largest, best financed actual Nazi copycat organization, but there was an even larger pro-Nazi organization in America called the German American Bund. They had about 30,000 members at one point. And they had enough members to run several summer camps for American Nazi youth. Remember, that was a big part of the German Nazi program, is these youth camps, like get them when they're young, indoctrinate them, and then you'll have them for their whole lives, right? So what effect do these factions actually have on America? Well, most pro-Nazi groups were on the fringes of public life, but they definitely created an atmosphere of uncertainty in a country where the Depression had called into question the virtues of capitalism and democracy.
Okay, so this nationalist, socialist, what were they called, the Nazis, before they were?
Nationalist, socialist, yeah.
So this kind of, these ideals were appealing because people were thinking, oh, maybe the old system doesn't work.
Well, people were considering fringe ideas in a way that they might not have considered before, because they lost trust in the system. I mean, the Depression was crushing for so many families, people losing their jobs, losing their homes, being forced to migrate to look for work. It was really not a good time. And America was just coming out of it in the late 1930s when what is going to become the world's most devastating war breaks out. So most Americans would have been aware of these groups simply because the amount of newspaper reporting done on them. Not a lot were joining them. The America First Committee was the most popular. And again, that was not a pro-Nazi group as such. It was an isolationist group. But these other ones, like the American Bund, 30,000, not that much considering the whole population of America. But there was a huge amount of public debate about them and what, if anything, should be done about them. Did they pose a threat to America? Right. So in 1939, the Dies Committee, a congressional body that investigated communist agitators and Nazi sympathizers, including the Bund, turned its attention to Pelly's group. Makes sense, right? Under pressure from the government, Pelly disbanded the Silver Shirts. And when World War II began, he was put on trial and sentenced to 15 years in prison.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, by that stage, we know what the Nazis are, don't we? And there's any sort of link to them is dangerous, I guess.
We did and we didn't. I mean, everybody knew who was paying attention that Adolf Hitler was aggressive and expansionist. He'd already seized part of Czechoslovakia. But there was a lot of questions about, well, where does his limitations end? That's why Chamberlain, the British Prime Minister, was so willing to negotiate and even appease. Say, well, look, if you just let him have Czechoslovakia, he's not going to take any more. It's really the invasion of Poland that convinces people that he's not going to stop.
Right.
So
he really got a taste for taking places, didn't he, Adolf?
Well,
it was like his favorite thing.
It was his, yeah. It was definitely his steez. He just wanted to grab as much territory as possible.
I mean, I'd be happy with Czechoslovakia if I stole a country.
You'd think that would be enough for most folks, even most dictators. But some people, there's no end to their ambition.
He just got a real taste for it, didn't he?
Well, the man had a vision, a very, very sick vision, and he was determined to try to put it into effect.
And he had a high fiber diet, so he had a lot of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as part of this investigation, our old friend Herr Schmidt is being monitored. And we know this because the following LA Times article mentions him. There was an article titled "Trouble for Traitors" from June 30th, 1940, and it may offer the only known contemporary mention of the elusive Schmidt. Do you want to hear it?
Go for it.
All right. Out in Santa Monica, only a few days ago, a man who was a veteran of the World War answered the doorbell one night. "Where is dot Herr Schmidt lives?" the caller asked in broken English. The former flyer appraised the man quickly, then smiled and directed him to Herr Schmidt's residence nearby. Within 10 minutes, the man had informed U.S. Navy intelligence, and within 20 minutes, the investigation was on. An operative who lived in the neighborhood was assigned to the case. You may be sure that when he finishes, naval intelligence will know all about Herr Schmidt and his mysterious visitors. But whether they are right or wrong, no one but naval intelligence knows.
Okay. So time's running out for Schmidt.
Yes, or Smith,
Mr. Smith.
I presume.
Look, I don't want any trouble. I can just see the future. I don't mean any harm.
And Hitler's going to be perfectly happy with just a little, he wants peace, a piece of Czechoslovakia, a piece of Poland, a piece of France.
A little bit of this, a little bit of that. What's the anglicized name of Adolf?
Adolf?
Alan?
Alan?
Alan Hitler.
That doesn't sound anywhere near as menacing.
Well, Alan, he's just a regular guy. He just likes travel.
Marching around, high explosives.
Vegetarian food.
Yeah.
He's very charismatic. He's very fun in real life.
And he's struggling. He talks a lot about his struggle.
Yeah, his mental health's not great. You know, you think he's got everything, but it's never enough.
Yeah. So, back to America.
Get in the car, Mr. Smith.
back to America and what's going on there. The next big moment in the story is Pearl Harbor, the Japanese attack on the naval base at Pearl Harbor. Okay. At that point, America is pulled into the war. And because Japan was allied with Germany...
Screw America first.
Yeah. Well, you know, they bombed it and killed 5,000 people. You know, what are you gonna do? You can't really stay neutral after that. Now, as a result, the attitudes and law enforcement in the country become a lot more strict on fascists and Nazi sympathizers for understandable reasons. Many German Americans were detained and taken to makeshift camps. For example, you have one at Terminal Island and Latuna Canyon in Sun Valley. And there they were interrogated before being sent to out-of-state barrack facilities under a military guard. This is according to LA Times. But let's go back to Herr Schmidt and the Stevens. Now, the Stevens claim that Herr Schmidt was arrested in 1941 for something to do with shortwave radio equipment being found belonging to him, and that he eventually died in prison.
It was shortwave equipment. What's that for?
Well, shortwave equipment can send a radio signal off across a much longer distance.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's the chosen kit for people who want to be in contact with foreign powers.
Right, okay.
Not a good look to have
Suspicious.
that, caught in your house when you're, thought of maybe a Nazi sympathizer.
Right. It's hard to explain.
Yeah, hard to explain.
I just like listening to the radio.
World music. Just listening to world music.
I really like Baroque.
So we know that the Stevens stopped paying architects in around 1941 because all available architectural plans cease after that date. They were probably under enormous pressure to stop what they were doing. You can see why. Yeah. Now, is this the only way it could have worked out? Well, I'm a historian and we don't do what-if prediction. But as a thought experiment, let's think about this for a moment. Some historians have argued that if the Depression had dragged on, or if the United States had sat out the war, the extremism bubbling beneath the surface may have become more organized and powerful. Now, there's also the question of if the U.S. had sat out the war, what would the result have been? Would it have just dragged on longer with the same conclusion, or is there a chance that Germany might have won?
Could ask Mr. Smith.
Well, we could ask Philip K. Dick. He wrote an amazing novel about it called The Man in the High Castle. It's very, very chilling. I highly
Around
recommend
that theme?
Mm-hmm. What if Germany and Japan had won?
But the thing is, America never sit out a war. They just won't take it.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a first time for everything, isn't there? Well, Hadley, our contributor, thinks we've absolutely swept under the rug the history of how many people with Nazi sympathizers were in America, because it doesn't fit America's narrative of what happened in World War II. And it's unpleasant and not the picture of a unified America. So we pretend it just didn't happen. No Nazis to be seen here. Right. But now that we've heard this story, we know that that's far from the truth. Yeah.
So there was a big Nazi presence.
Substantial.
Sorry,
Substantial.
That was not deliberate, that sound.
No, but it added dramatic flair to your comment.
I ring a gong every time I do a little summary of something that didn't need summarizing.
Oh that's a
you just said that there was lots of Nazis, and I said there was lots of Nazis in America.
Do we
my
have to
little
pay extra
repetition
for that sound
gong.
effect? All right, so let's finish up with what happens to this retreat. The Stevens stay on at the ranch.
Were they all right? Were they not incriminated in all this?
Apparently not. I mean, they don't seem to. It doesn't seem from the story we get and from our contributor, they didn't get thrown in jail or anything.
Okay, Winona and Norman must have been quite sweet, nice people.
Yeah, well, they stay on at the ranch. They live above a steel garage on the site. They run a small farm. They keep their heads down, wise considering their associates. And later they meet Dr. Vincent. He visits in 1948, meets them in their garage, and decides it's perfect for the Huntington Hartford Institute Artist Retreat, and he buys it on behalf of the Institute. Now, this is the part I really love. So what do you do with a place that was a former Nazi headquarters? Who do you bring in to kind of make a non-Nazi set of buildings? Frank Lloyd Wright.
Okay. Who's this guy?
Oh, Frank Lloyd Wright. He's one of the premier architects of the time. He's absolutely famous. The Art Institute of Chicago has a whole Frank Lloyd Wright room. You ever see like mid-century modern architecture? You know, it's wood, or mid-century modern furniture tends to be wood and kind of natural curves.
I'm going to say probably.
Probably. You probably have.
I can't visualize it right now.
Trust me, if you see it, you'll like it and you'll recognize it. I'm a big fan of mid-century modern myself. Anyway, he builds these adorable little cottages on the property for the artists. Folks could come for a certain amount of time and they could just focus on their writing. And it really flourished for a few years. But
some Nazis broke in.
No. That would be a poetic ending. Nazis busting up the Frank Lloyd Wright cottages.
Some old boys in silver shirts. We're not dead.
We're still here.
You thought you'd killed us.
We've come for your art.
Yes, give us everything.
No,
hey, the blonde boy. Come with me.
Much less dramatic, though a problem that California still faces, not Nazis to my knowledge, but wildfires. 1965, due to the threat of wildfires, the retreat closes. And subsequently, a lot of the buildings are torn down due to safety concerns. And part of it becomes a state park.
Okay. It is a very ripe location for wildfires. And there's a gas tank. And you don't want that getting on fire.
Yeah, so this is now where the Nazi White House is now part of Topanga State Park.
Okay. Skate park.
No, not skate park, state park.
Okay. So
no skating.
So that's
no skating in the state
Nazi
park.
skateboarders.
No Nazi. Well, I don't know. That's a good question. Not to my knowledge.
I would watch that if that was in the Olympics.
Nazi skateboarders.
Yeah.
They'd be very orderly. I mean, isn't part of skateboarding like freestyling stuff?
Yeah, but they'd imitate freestyling with ruthless efficiency.
Oh, that's a good point. I don't know. Those tight little trousers they wear might make skating hard. Aren't you supposed to wear loose-fitting clothing?
They'd be allowed to wear little shorts.
I think a phalanx, if you were, of little Nazi skateboarders trying to make the little salute in their tight little trousers and then falling all over themselves in a kind of Charlie Chaplin-esque way. I think that's a good ending.
It could be some wacky music.
Yeah.
It would all seem quite sweet.
Yeah. I mean, what's the best way to defang something so horrible then with that image, I think?
Well, if America's going to write Nazis out of history, can't we write them back in? If you're playing with history, can't you play with the future?
Yeah, that's what I always say to my students. I mean, if we're playing with history, why don't we just start making stuff up?
Make stuff up.
Yeah, why not?
We're the big guys; they'll believe us. If it's around long enough, someone will start believing it, and then it will become its own thing.
Yeah, maybe keep that stuff in a secret valley, your own private secret valley.
So the Nazis of LA, these guys that were not really in history, they're not sort of talked about because it doesn't suit the narrative. But they were on the wrong side of history, but they could so easily have been on the right side of history if it had worked out differently.
Yeah, and this phrase, America First, is now roared back into our public discourse.
It's a good one. And you can say anything and then first, and it sounds quite pleasing.
True. And
Sascha first.
Sascha first? No, Sascha's never first. Sascha prefers to be second. It's the first person who always gets shot.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Well, they're at the front.
Oh, okay.
Trust me, I teach World War I and World War II. You don't want to be at the front.
Right. It's the sort of lambs to the slaughter.
Yeah.
The young guys.
Yeah. It's like the dinosaurs getting wiped out by the asteroids. You know, you want to be the little mammals scurrying around underneath them. Heat shadow.
Did Norma and Winona believe in creationism, or did they believe in dinosaurs?
God knows what they believed in.
Yeah.
Maybe not even God.
Well, they believed in Mr. Smith.
Yeah.
Until he was thrown away, and then they just put their heads down and their hands down.
Okay, sweetie, we'll put that down and we'll just keep quiet up here in the valley and hope they don't come up and question us.
Is that a swastika? No, it's called a svastika. It's a Swedish symbol.
No, it's a Hindu symbol.
It's a Hindu symbol.
We had a guy here called Mr. Vincent. He wants to buy it for his art. Seemed like a nice man.
Though philanthropists often have something to hide, don't they? That's why they're doing the nice thing. They're trying to sort of pay off their own guilt. So what did he? I want to know more about Dr. Vincent.
Greenwashing.
What's he been up to? Why is he hiding behind his art thing? What's he got in his past? I reckon he was mates with one of the czars.
With one of the czars.
Yeah, and he's returned. But by investing in the wrong thing, and it's a bit like when I bought shares in Minidisc in the mid-90s. I put all of my money, and if I had been right, I would be absolutely minted. I wouldn't need to be here talking to you now.
But you weren't right, were you?
No, I was wrong. Also, sometimes, I don't know if you ever get this, where there's a limited run of a certain food, like a limited edition Kit Kat.
Uh-huh.
They had a beetroot flavored rice cakes.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, at the supermarket, and I just bought all of them because I was so afraid of never having them again. So I had 100 packs in the cupboard at one point.
100 packs of beetroot rice cakes.
Yeah, and if you'd opened the cupboard as a guest, you would have just assumed that I was a sort of radicalized, freak.
You're preparing for the beetroot apocalypse.
Right, the end of days.
Well, we have a secret ranch where you could
I could go up and nibble them.
Self-sustaining.
Yeah.
It's got its own water tower.
And then have a little swim in the underground pool.
Until the Nazi skateboarders show up, and then you're screwed. We've come for your beetroot rice cakes. All right, I think we should wrap this one up right there.
Producer Lewis here. Thanks for listening to this episode of Where Did Everyone Go? New episodes every Wednesday and Sunday. Follow, comment, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out.